Okay, I'll keep this brief. We've got a little bit more with primary keys. As we saw in the previous video, when we define a table, when we create it, we can specify the column that we want to be a primary key by specifying primary key right after the column name and the data type and other constraints. But there's another way of doing this, another syntax that you'll see, and it looks like this. We can create our column cat ID, it's an integer, it can't be null, and then later on we can come back and say, hey, remember that cat ID? Make it a primary key. These will both do the same thing, it's just a different syntax. I actually tend to prefer this one here. However, this one is a little long for slides, or horizontally long at least. So I'll often in the slides resort to this just to keep things a bit more compact so that I can make the text larger. But you'll see both of them in the world. You should know that they both exist. Primary key and then a column name, in our case cat ID, is the same as calling it a primary key when we initially set it up. The next thing I want to talk about is not null. It is technically redundant to specify a column as a primary key and as not null, because primary keys can never be null. That's just how they work. If I copy and paste this one, well, it's called unique cats. I already have unique cats, don't I? Let's drop our table, unique cats, goodbye, and remake it. This time, cat ID is simply an integer. It doesn't say not null, but I do make it a primary key. If I try and insert into unique cats, and I do a cat ID, a name, and an age. Let's just start with a regular cat that meets those requirements. Cat ID is 1, name, I'll just go to Oingo this time. Age is 2. I insert that cat, no problem. But let's say that I leave off this primary key, cat ID. It doesn't say not null, but it is a primary key. That means it's required. And if I hit enter, well, I get an error this time because I told SQL I was going to provide a cat ID and I didn't. So let me fix that. I'm not going to provide a cat ID, as if I was expecting it to allow me to insert it without an ID. But we have a problem. It says cat ID doesn't have a default value. And that's the same error we saw when we set up not null, but we didn't set up not null. We set up a primary key. If I describe my cats table though, or my unique cats table, we do see that it cannot be null. So I didn't say that, I just said it was a primary key, but it's redundant to specify not null because that primary key constraint requires that value to be present alongside being unique. The final thing and most useful thing that I'm going to show you, I think, in this video is setting up auto increment on your primary key fields. So there's a special thing, auto underscore increment. It's easy to forget the underscore because we have primary space key, but it is auto underscore increment, is going to make a column automatically increment starting at 1. You can change that, but it doesn't really matter for us. We'll have 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4, and we don't have to go and add anything. We don't have to manually insert and keep track of the unique IDs. We can just rely on the auto increment. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it in. And is it also called unique cats? All right, this one is unique cats 3. Terrible name. But if we do that, I can now insert into unique cats 3. And I don't have to specify a cat ID. I simply need name and age. And technically, I don't need any of those actually because they're not required. They could be null, but let's add them in. So name will be Boingo and age will be 1 for this first cat. Let's take a look. Select star from unique cats 3, and we see that cat ID was automatically assigned and it's set to 1. Now if I insert another cat, I can actually just insert the exact same cat in terms of name and age and keep doing that. And every single row that I insert here will have its own unique cat ID because I set up that auto increment. So from unique cats 3, select everything. They all look the same, Boingo 1, Boingo 1, but cat ID automatically incremented for each one of them. So this is really useful because now I have this primary key that doesn't require any effort on my part to be unique. I don't have to keep track of a number and add 1 or anything like that. I just insert a value and we automatically get that unique ID. So that's super common to do. We combine auto increment with primary key all the time. And you can do it on the same line. Just want to be clear about that. If I copied this, let's say I'm doing it from a script like over here in a file, I can do this. Auto increment primary key. It doesn't have to be on separate lines. And let's call this unique cats 4, which is annoying, but let's just call it that. And run this script. I've got an extra comma here, so it's going to complain to me. Make sure I'm in the pet shop database. All right. And how do I run new here? I need to click lightning bolt. Let's describe unique cats 4. And you'll see that we have that primary key. We have auto increment set up. And if I were to insert a cat, insert into unique cats 4 values. Let's say I'm inserting nothing. It's just going to be empty. I'll do it a couple of times. And then I select everything from my unique cats 4. We see cat ID did work. It's a primary key. It automatically increments 1, 2, 3, and so on. And the last thing I should mention is when you set up the auto increment, if I did try and insert a cat that manually had a cat ID that was already in use, like insert into unique cats 4, let's say I'm adding the cat ID myself, which you normally wouldn't do if you have auto increment set up. But if I wanted to, a cat that has the ID of 3, I'm going to get an error because there's already a cat in there with cat ID of 3. Just because we have auto increment doesn't mean that the regular sort of primary key constraint goes away. It still has to be unique, even if I'm not the one usually making this number, right? I'm relying on the auto increment capability. If I try to insert a duplicate value, I'll get an error and it won't insert. Okay, so that's primary key and auto increment. You'll see them together all the time.